Okay, I accidentally deleted that one, but this is 1001, the Millennial Year, and I guess I'll go through it again. For starters, we had the Granada Magnate again neutralized by the Saracens, and we have a new magnate over in Denmark who conquered Saxony. He couldn't take anything more valuable. It just was too tough point when you added up the points of different things. The Britons ended up having a leader dies heirless event, which they had to recover from. They have a pretty crappy leader at the end of it all, but at least Wessex is more wealthy. The French conquered Brittany and ended up with a godlike leader, a 929. And that'll be an impressive and powerful thing to see. The Byzantines, facing the Muscovite incursion, instead of trying to fight their way back through it, they decided just to cut the head off and attack through Kiev. And actually they took everything except Novgorod. But the Muscovites were able to come back and attack and take back a couple of territories. Actually, they only conquered one. The other one they took with a dynastic inheritance, which everybody said the Byzantines had to get out of there. And they're just so far ahead. But it definitely underlines what happens when you face somebody with piles and piles of cash. Worse, the Byzantines ended up with a pretty decent leader on top of it. The conquests were done with, I don't know what he was, like a 2-2-3 or something. Not a very good leader at all. The Poles, who had been considering going in against the Byzantines last turn, when they saw what the Muscovites managed, said, "Oh, I don't think so now." And mainly what they had to do was recover from their taxation. They did taxation, got a couple unrests, and they handled that. Finally, the Germans, who instead of going to Austria with their good leader to try to convert it, decided to try to improve their economic situation, and they got Franconia up to a +3, Swabia up a little, and Flanders is almost ready to start producing money now. You know, you got to make your choices, and it's usually good to have a pile of money because it makes you safer, at least in other people's eyes. All right. The year is 1006, and we see both of the magnates actually disappeared. Oh, he shouldn't still be on the board. Sorry about that. Alright. Main actions. Not a lot's happened in most areas. I guess the biggest point, the Muscovites wiped off the map. Again, don't piss the guy off with the money. The prince is in a new home in Bavaria. And the Germans have actually been supporting them with their money in the thought of, you know, the Byzantines are so far ahead right now, we ought to. However, the Germans are seeing a new threat. That threat's from France. First of all, there was that god leader in France, which the Germans kind of forgot about, ruled their own territory, built a fort in Franconia, and ended up with a less effective ruler than they had before. As soon as the French took over, were ready to take their turn, their thought was, I'm going to go grab all these Romance language areas that the Germans are holding for some reason. I can actually make use of them, and the Germans really can't, at least not as easily. And the Saracens are almost gone, so even the coastal stuff is likely to become worth something soon. It's easier to take stuff from the Germans, especially with a crappy leader, than, not crappy, but average, than it is to convert at least Portugal, Castile, and Leon. The Muslim territories would be easy to take and make Catholic. So that was his consideration. However, he died heirless. Brittany disappeared, and the French got a new leader. Still pretty good. 9-point diplomacy, 5-point admin. Hard choice. Do you administrate a not terribly wealthy kingdom or take advantage of that potent 9? The choice was, the player decided to make the choice of taking diplomatic action against the Germans. Sardinia, fell immediately to diplomatic incentives. Now they have claim to it as well. Everybody basically supported their expansion. However, elsewhere, all they got out of it was a tie to Provence. That's one of the problems with diplomacy. You look at your attributes, your stats, and you say, oh, I'm a good diplomat, I should go do that. Well, diplomacy is really unlikely to give you more than a tie. And there's strong incentive not to push too hard in the diplomacy realm. So he may go back to trying to rule his territory. All right, here we are still in 1006, and we have an interesting situation that arose. The Assyrian Magnate came into being and conquered Jerusalem after failing to take Cilicia and getting his social state down low enough he couldn't attack it any longer. We're in a situation where a crusade can happen, and indeed it is happening. The Germans called for it, and hence are the leader of the Crusades. All the Christian players get to vote on it, Catholic and Orthodox. The only people opposed to it are the Byzantines, who really do not want a bunch of Western crusaders wandering through their territory, and know that's why the agreement was made. And the French, who luckily have a humongous diplomacy, because they have a good leader and want to be able to use that leader in France to restore order or against the Germans to gain territory diplomatically. Everyone else has kind of minor leaders. The Poles are Orthodox, so they're not affected by it, so they're totally in favor of it. The Muscovites, of course, are completely in favor of anything that might hurt Byzantines. And yeah, the Germans have some desires on the Byzantine territory in Italy. And the Britons are not particularly opposed. Now, in a real game of this, usually the players don't really want a crusade, the Western players. Just whenever I've played it, but in the Grand Campaign especially, the Byzantines are, and really in this scenario, in the Crusader scenario too, the Byzantines are at such an advantage that by not taking this chance to hit them and hurt them, you're probably conceding the game to them. Now, I've seen the Germans win the Crusade scenario, Millennium, and there's one more after that. But it's risky. The Byzantines have too good attack space and are too isolated. Anyway, so the Crusade's going to happen, and we'll see what the effects of that are. So the Crusade ended as a partial success. Depending on what the desire was, the Crusaders moved through Hungary, and the Byzantines allowed them there. They had to attack Serbia because that's a Muscovite-held thing. There's no rule saying the Muscovites can give them access. Kind of a call on my part. The Muscovites certainly would have, but it's not Roman Catholic. It's not held by the Byzantines, so I followed the rules strictly. They conquered Adrianopolis, and the reason the Byzantines said, oh no, you can't go through here, you're starting to hit our rich stuff and it's going to be hard. Well, they spent a good deal of money and took it. And the Byzantines didn't actually defend it, they just said no. Having learned that, the Byzantines allowed them to continue through Constantinople, Asia, Cilicia, several attacks into Syria, which were successful, but then finally when they took Jerusalem, they lost Syria. And they were unable to retake Syria. Syria is a hard one to take because of the high population as well as everything. What's happened? Well, the wealth of the West is gone. The good French leader is gone. And the Germans got themselves a really good warrior. We'll do the actual player turns now, but if you see, nobody's got any cards left from the Western side. 1011, about 1,000 years ago. Wow. So after the Crusades, what we saw was the Poles beginning to convert Brandenburg. They ended up with a very good war leader, which is why they're doing that. But they hurt Poland itself, their home area, quite a bit in the attacks. They should have been able to convert it with the amount of cards in their leadership. The Byzantines reconquered Adrianople. They did not move forward into Serbia. They didn't even try. They began to rule instead to try to bring some order to the chaos that has become of their empire. They should pick up Serbia, though, just because of the claim. The good news for them, however, is that the Muscovite prince died heirless and is now out of the game. We're back to a 5-player game. So all that territory can now be claimed fairly easily by the Byzantines. That's kind of bad news for Poland in the sense that Poland was kind of hoping to gain something out of this situation. I doubt the Byzantines are going to move against Poland, though. They're kind of in favor of its existence, as long as the Poles don't piss them off. That's it. The year is 1016. This is at the end. This is after those the Crusade turn. So all the European powers actually got a chance to do things, but not a lot changed actually. The Poles managed to convert Brandenburg. Now they're up to 15 victory points for conversions. The only other player with any is the Byzantines with 30. The Britons have improved their situation in Wessex. The French muddled about to no effect. The Germans had a very good leader, which they lost and now have crap. They began a conversion of Austria under that leader, but he died. The Byzantines recaptured all the Muscovite territories, and this is one of the problems, of course, with any game. I'm having to use counters that aren't meant to be what they are. Red is one of the two largest counter mixes, red and green, and that's pretty much all there is left for the Byzantines. They'll be losing some of these territories. There's no question. You can't hold an empire this size. But so long as they have them, they're going to be using extra counters. 1021 and the end of this turn. Only really exciting thing we saw was the addition of another magnate in Norway who damaged Wessex a bit, trying to raid it so he could conquer it. French went into Cordova to try to conquer it, failed. One thing that's just beautiful about this game to me is the lovely futility that it sort of inspires or shows of trying to roll anything, really. If you have a fairly small, compact, and wealthy area, you can do very well, and you can raise it to the maximum, and you can collect lots and lots of money, which is what the Byzantines did earlier. But once you start getting a large empire, such as the Byzantines have now, keeping it is really tough. And if you don't have a good leader, even if you have one of those compact areas, it's just impossible to do anything valuable with it. As you collect money, you could throw that money into your ruling aspect so that you don't damage it as you're going. But generally what we see is the nations they don't grow, they don't get better. The goal is kind of to keep yourself from collapsing and gain what you can, but put yourself in a strong long-term position. Right now, there's no one other than the Byzantines that I would say is in really, really good shape. Certainly Germany, France, actually all 5 players have a strong base. There's no question there, but any of them can fall. The Britons, they lose 3 territories, 4 conquest events, and they're not gone. They're off the board. The French, 5 conquest events because Ile-de-France is so big, but they're so poor that might be fairly easy. The Germans have a much larger number of territories, 1, 2, 3, 4, but still only 5 conquest events. One person in one turn can take them out if they don't save a card. The Poles, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 right now. So they actually have the best home area out of the European powers. but Brandenburg's going to convert to Saxon at some point because of the way I play. And the Byzantines are very powerful. Their home area is really tough to take. No one can take them out in one shot. Of course, the way the Crusades go, you can do a lot of damage to them by concentrating all of Europe's power moving through them. And if they resist it, then they actually suffer. If they don't resist it, they just suffer a little bit. All right, I'm going to wrap this sucker up for the turn. And maybe I can start speeding things up if they go like the last couple rounds did.